The sands of Egypt whisper secrets carved in stone. Who was the true architect of this ancient wisdom, the mastermind behind the pyramids and the sacred texts? Meet Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge, writing, and magic. Think of him as the ultimate celestial librarian, the divine know-it-all who held the universe's secrets in his grasp. By the end of this journey, you will know the full story of the god who gave Egypt its voice and shaped the very fabric of reality. We will uncover how he helped judge souls in the afterlife and why a simple wager with the moon created our modern calendar. What does it mean to hold all the knowledge in the world? But the story of Thoth begins with a profound mystery, his own origin. Unlike other gods with straightforward lineages, Thoth emerges from the cosmic chaos in two very different, equally fascinating ways. The first and perhaps most powerful version claims he was self-created, speaking himself into existence at the very beginning of time. He is said to have burst forth from the lips of the sun god Ra himself, a living embodiment of divine command and intelligent speech. Think of the first word ever spoken, a vibration that condensed into a being of pure knowledge. This origin establishes him as a fundamental force, a god who was present at the dawn of creation, not merely a product of it. Yet another dramatic myth ties his birth directly to the epic struggle between the gods Horus and Set. In this version, Thoth is born from the conflict itself, springing from the head of Set during a ferocious battle. This story connects him not just to pure knowledge but to the resolution of chaos, making him a god of arbitration and balance from his very first moment. So, was he a primordial force of intellect or a divine judge born from conflict? The Egyptians seemed comfortable holding both truths, each illustrating a different facet of his immense power. This complex nature is reflected in his family. Thoth had two primary divine consorts, each representing a pillar of his domain. His union with Maat, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order, was a perfect match. She personified the fundamental harmony of the universe, and as her partner, Thoth was the scribe who recorded and upheld that balance. His other wife was Seshat, the goddess of writing, architecture, and record-keeping. With her, he oversaw the sacred foundations of civilization, from the precise lines of a temple to the immutable records of a king's reign. Through these relationships, Thoth's role becomes clear. He was the cosmic administrator, ensuring that both the physical and moral universe operated according to a divine and truthful plan. He even fathered a lesser-known god, Hornub, a lord of messages and communication, further extending his influence over the flow of information. This entire divine family worked in concert with Thoth at the center, using the power of the written word to maintain the very structure of reality. His form is as distinctive as his wisdom, a man's body crowned with the elegant head of an ibis bird. This was the sacred image of Thoth, instantly recognizable across ancient Egypt. In his hands, he typically clutches the tools of his trade, a scribe's palette and a sharpened stylus, ready to inscribe divine words onto the world. But why the ibis? Every detail was a deliberate choice, rich with symbolic meaning. The ibis, with its long, gracefully curved beak, was a living representation of the crescent moon in the night sky. This directly connected Thoth to his role as a lunar deity, a measurer of time and the cycles that govern our world. Furthermore, the bird's natural behavior was seen as a perfect metaphor for the pursuit of knowledge. As the ibis wades through the waters, patiently probing the mud with its beak in search of nourishment, so too does the wise person sift through information, seeking the hidden truths that lie beneath the surface. It is a powerful image of a god who is constantly searching, investigating, and uncovering what is concealed. Yet this was not his only sacred animal. Thoth also manifested as a baboon, specifically the intelligent Hamadryas baboon. Egyptians observed these creatures with great interest, noting their complex social structures and their apparent chattering conversations at each other. This chattering, especially loud at dawn, was interpreted as the baboons worshipping the rising sun, acting as celestial heralds. Their perceived intelligence and their connection to solar and lunar cycles made them a fitting, if more primal, symbol for Thoth's vast intellect. The baboon embodies a different facet of wisdom, not the quiet, probing search of the ibis, but the vocal, active, and sometimes chaotic application of knowledge. So whether depicted as the serene ibis-headed scribe or the wise chattering baboon, Thoth's iconography tells a complete story, a being who encompasses both the methodical pursuit of truth and its dynamic expression in the world. This divine intellect did not remain locked away in the heavens. It was gifted directly to humanity through the most transformative of tools, the written word. Thoth was revered as the inventor of hieroglyphs and the entire Egyptian language itself, the ultimate architect of human communication. He was considered the lord of the divine words, the one who gave sounds visible form and meaning. For the ancient Egyptians, this was not merely a practical invention. It was a sacred act that connected the human realm directly to the divine. Every symbol carved into a temple wall or inked onto a papyrus scroll was a piece of this god's cosmic knowledge made permanent. It is no wonder then that Thoth became the ultimate patron saint for every scribe in the kingdom. The scribe's profession was the backbone of Egyptian civilization, more vital than any single pharaoh. These men were the administrators, the tax collectors, the temple recorders, and the historians. They turned the chaotic flow of events and goods into orderly lines of text, governing the nation with their reed pens and papyrus. A famous text advised young men to become scribes, pointing out that while a soldier's body could be broken or a laborer's back could give out, a scribe's work secured his position and legacy. They saw Thoth as their direct protector and inspiration, the divine scribe to whom they owed their very craft. Before dipping his pen into ink, a scribe would often offer a small prayer or invocation to Thoth. He might ask for a steady hand, for a clear mind, and most importantly, for accuracy in his work. A single mistake in a royal decree or a temple inventory could have cosmic consequences, disrupting the order, the mat that Thoth himself upheld. They believed Thoth would guide their hands, ensuring that the words they wrote were not just correct, but were themselves a form of magic that maintained the balance of the world. This was not a casual routine, it was a sacred ritual, a request for a spark of the god's own limitless intellect to flow through them and onto the page. But the true test of a soul begins at the end of a life, in the silent and awe-inspiring Hall of Maat. Here, in the ultimate courtroom, every individual faced a judgment that would determine their eternal fate. The air would be thick with anticipation as the deceased stood before a panel of 42 divine judges and the great god Osiris, the lord of the underworld. The central ritual was both simple and terrifyingly profound, the weighing of the heart. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, would carefully place the deceased's heart on one side of a massive golden scale. On the other side, he would place the feather of Maat, a single, perfect plume representing truth, justice, and cosmic order. The entire fate of a soul rested on this delicate balance. If the heart, heavy with the weight of a lifetime of lies, greed, or violence, sank lower than the feather, a monstrous beast known as the Devourer waited nearby. This creature, part lion, part hippo, and part crocodile, would consume the heart, obliterating the soul forever. But if the heart was as light as the feather, proving a life lived in harmony with truth and righteousness, the reward was eternal paradise in the field of reeds. And standing right beside the scales, watching this cosmic drama unfold with unwavering focus, was Thoth. His role was absolutely critical. Dressed in his ibis-headed form, he held his scribe's palette and stylus at the ready. He was the impartial recorder, the divine notary of the afterlife. His sharp eyes fixed on the trembling scales, he would wait for the precise moment of equilibrium or imbalance. Then, with meticulous precision, he would inscribe the verdict onto his palette. He did not judge, he did not interfere, he simply recorded the objective truth of what the scales revealed. His accurate record-keeping was the final, unchangeable seal on this cosmic justice. Without his written testimony, the entire system would collapse into chaos. A soul could not be granted passage to the afterlife based on a feeling or a rumor. It required the immutable proof of Thoth's sacred writing. His word was the final word, the document that opened the gates to paradise or sealed a soul's doom. This was the ultimate responsibility of the God of Knowledge, to ensure that not even in death could the truth be twisted or forgotten. This cosmic judge also brought his wisdom to the most bitter feud in all of mythology. A war for the throne of Egypt raged for decades between the falcon god Horus, the rightful heir, and his uncle Set, the chaotic god of storms and disorder. Their conflict threatened to tear the world apart, and it was Thoth who stepped in, not as a warrior but as the ultimate peacemaker. He became the voice of reason in a room of shouting deities, the calm center of a divine storm. When Set, in a fit of rage, viciously injured Horus, ripping out his eye, it was Thoth who intervened. He did not take sides, he simply saw a wrong that needed to be made right. With his profound knowledge of magic and medicine, he gently healed the wounded eye, restoring it completely. This was no ordinary organ, it became the legendary Wedjat eye, a powerful symbol of protection, wholeness, and royal power restored. Thoth's act was more than a medical procedure, it was a symbolic restoration of order itself. Yet his impartiality was absolute. In another brutal encounter, Horus retaliated, severely injuring Set. Once again, Thoth applied his healing arts, mending the wounds without judgment. He understood that for true balance to be achieved, neither side could be left broken or permanently diminished. His goal was not victory for one, but resolution for all. The gods constantly devised impossible tests to determine the true king. In one, Set demanded they both turn into hippopotamuses and submerge themselves in a river, with the winner being the one who could hold his breath the longest. As the days stretched on and the two gods remained submerged, it was Thoth who convinced their mother, Isis, to take action to end the stalemate before they both drowned. He was the strategist of peace, finding diplomatic solutions where brute force had failed. His interventions repeatedly pulled the pantheon back from the brink of self-destruction, cementing his reputation as the god who valued resolution over conflict and who understood that true power lies not in winning a fight but in ending one. The same divine intellect that restored cosmic balance also mastered the very flow of time itself. Thoth's wisdom gave humanity its most essential tool for survival, the 365-day calendar. Before this monumental invention, the Egyptians relied on a simpler lunar calendar of just 360 days. This left a crucial gap, a mismatch with the solar year that slowly threw the seasons into chaos. For a civilization built entirely on the predictable flooding of the Nile, this was a disaster in the making. Farmers needed to know precisely when the river would rise to plant their crops. The entire rhythm of life, from temple festivals to tax collection, depended on accurate timekeeping. The solution to this crisis arrived not through a solemn decree, but through a clever gamble. The myth tells us that Thoth challenged the moon god, Aya, to a game of dice or senate, a popular board game of chance and strategy. Thoth, being the god of all knowledge, was of course a master player. He played with such skill and luck that he won a sliver of light from the moon itself. He took this luminous prize and wove it into 5 extra days, adding them to the end of the year. These became known as the epagomenal days, a time outside of time that fell between the end of one year and the start of the next. This single act of divine gaming stabilized the entire agricultural cycle, aligning the human world perfectly with the sun. But the story does not end there, for these 5 days held another, even more profound purpose. They provided a sacred space for creation to continue. On each of these 5 new days, a powerful deity was born. First came Osiris, the lord of the afterlife, followed by Horus the elder, the mighty warrior god. Then Set, the embodiment of chaos and storm, was born, followed by his sister and wife, Isis, the great magician and mother. Finally, the fifth day saw the birth of Nephthys, the lady of the temple and companion to the dead. Thoth did not just give Egypt a calendar, he gifted the world the 5 days that allowed its most important gods to come into being. His connection to time was deeply personal, rooted in his very nature as a lunar deity. The moon's constant cycle of waxing and waning, its reliable disappearance and triumphant return, made it the perfect celestial clock. As the god who measured the moon, Thoth became the master of all measures, of mathematics, of the stars, and of the infinite passage of moments. He was the reason a farmer knew when to sow his seeds and a priest knew when to conduct a sacred rite. Every month that passed was a testament to his victory over chaos, a rhythm written in moonlight by the hand of the divine scribe. Above the scales of judgment and the feuds of gods, Thoth's silver disk sailed through the night sky. He was not just a god of wisdom, but the moon itself, a celestial body whose cool, measured light governed the darkness. The ancient Egyptians saw his face in its glowing surface, naming him the Silver Aten, a radiant counterpoint to the sun's blazing fury. While the sun god Ra ruled the day with overwhelming power, Thoth governed the night with patient intelligence, his gentle illumination revealing a world that would otherwise be lost to shadow. This was no small task. His light guided travelers, comforted the fearful, and exposed the hidden movements of the world after sundown. His lunar nature made him the ultimate timekeeper. Every night, he meticulously measured the passage of hours, his journey across the heavens a perfect, predictable clockwork of divine knowledge. The moon's relentless cycle, from a sliver of light to a brilliant full orb and back again, was a constant, visible lesson in mathematics and cosmic order. It was a rhythm written in light, a celestial heartbeat that Thoth himself maintained. This rhythmic cycle was deeply tied to the most hopeful concepts in Egyptian thought, rebirth and regeneration. Just as the moon seemed to die, disappearing completely from the sky for 3 nights, it was always reborn, returning stronger each night. This was not seen as a failure, but as a promise. It mirrored the journey of the sun, which vanished each evening only to rise again at dawn, and the journey of the soul, which passed through death toward a new existence. Thoth, as the master of this cycle, became a god of resurrection, his silver light a guide for the dead navigating the darkness of the underworld, assuring them that an end is always followed by a new beginning. This eternal rhythm, this dependable pulse of light and shadow, was the ultimate expression of Ma'at, the cosmic balance that Thoth was sworn to uphold. The universe breathed in and out with the phases of his moon, a silent, majestic order maintained by the quiet intellect of the divine scribe in the sky. This immense cosmic knowledge was not left unrecorded, but was said to be compiled into a single, legendary volume, the Book of Thoth. Imagine a text so potent it held the keys to the universe itself, containing spells to comprehend the language of beasts, to gaze directly upon the gods without being blinded, and to command the very forces of nature. For a magician or priest in ancient Egypt, this book represented the ultimate power, the final secret, yet this power was never meant for mortal hands. The legends are filled with dire warnings, speaking of terrible curses and supernatural traps designed to protect the book from any who dared to seek it. To even look upon its pages was to risk madness, and to read its words aloud was to invite immediate and catastrophic consequences. It was the very definition of forbidden knowledge, a treasure so dangerous that the reward for finding it was often a swift and terrible doom. This myth reflects a profound truth the Egyptians understood deeply, that some wisdom is too great for humanity to wield responsibly. The desire to know everything, to possess all secrets, could unravel the very fabric of Ma'at, the cosmic order that Thoth himself worked to maintain. The story of the Book of Thoth is not just a tale of magical power, but a timeless caution about the perilous line between enlightenment and self-destruction. What would you risk to know everything, and what might such knowledge cost you? The power of the Book of Thoth was not merely theoretical, for its wisdom was actively deployed in the most pivotal drama of the Egyptian cosmos. When the noble god Osiris was betrayed and murdered by his brother Set, his dismembered body scattered across the land, it was Thoth who became the silent architect of resurrection. He saw the profound grief of Isis, the wife of Osiris, and recognized that her quest was not just one of love, but a necessary act to restore the world's balance. Thoth did not perform the resurrection himself. Instead, he became the ultimate teacher, guiding Isis to the precise magical spells, the sacred hekau, required for the impossible task. He provided the words of power that would reunite the fragmented body of Osiris, the incantations to restart his heart, and the rituals to temporarily restore his vitality. This was not a simple gift, it was a transfer of divine knowledge from the master of magic to its most determined student. With Thoth's guidance, Isis successfully revived Osiris long enough to conceive their son, the falcon god Horus, ensuring a lineage of order would one day challenge the reign of chaos. But Thoth's role did not end there. With Osiris established as the Lord of the Dead, Thoth turned his attention to the living heir, the vulnerable child Horus. He became the young god's most crucial advisor and protector, a divine guardian shielding him from Set's relentless machinations. Isis hid her son in the papyrus marshes of the Nile Delta, yet danger lurked everywhere. When a venomous serpent bit the infant Horus, it was Thoth who descended. He did not fight the snake with a weapon, he fought the poison with words. Speaking a powerful healing spell, he drew the toxin from the child's body, saving the future king of Egypt. He was the strategist in the shadows, using his foresight to anticipate Set's plots and his vast knowledge to counter them. He taught Horus not just how to survive, but how to think, preparing him for the inevitable confrontation. Thoth's wisdom was the shield that protected the promise of a restored kingdom, proving that the most powerful magic is often the knowledge of what to say, and when to say it to change the fate of the world. Long before the first pyramid cast its shadow, before the Nile carved its path through the desert, there was only none. An endless, dark, and silent ocean of chaos, a formless potential waiting for a voice. It was within this profound nothingness that Thoth first exercised his ultimate power, not as a scribe or a judge, but as a fundamental force of creation itself. In the city of Hermopolis, priests taught that the universe began not with a single god, but with a council of 8 primordial beings known as the Ogdoad. These were 4 pairs of male and female deities, each representing a fundamental quality of the pre-creation void. There was Nun and his female counterpart Nonet, the endless waters. Kuk and Kokit embodied the infinite darkness, then came Ha and Horhit, who were formlessness itself, and finally, the most mysterious pair, Ammon and Ammonet, representing the hidden power of the air, that which cannot be seen. Thoth was intrinsically linked to this last pair, often seen as their intellectual manifestation or even their direct offspring. He was the living embodiment of the intelligence and language that existed within that silent, chaotic soup. He was the concept of a word before it was ever spoken, the divine logic waiting to be applied. The Ogdoad themselves were not anthropomorphic gods as we imagine them. They were more like cosmic principles, the essential ingredients of reality huddled together in the swirling waters of Nun. Their collective action stirred the waters, and from that tumult the first mound of earth, the Benben, emerged from the deep. It was upon this primordial island that the sun first rose, and with its light the potential for order was born. But light alone was not enough to structure the cosmos. It required a voice, a command. This is where Thoth's unique nature came into play. While other creator gods like Ptah were said to think the world into existence, Thoth was the power that spoke it aloud. His divine words, his hekau, were vibrations that gave shape and name to the formless elements churned up by the Ogdoad. He was the utterance that separated the sky from the earth, the decree that set the sun on its daily course. Think of it as the difference between having a brilliant idea in your mind and then articulating it with such precision and power that it becomes real. Thoth was that articulation for the entire universe. He did not work in isolation. His creative power intertwined with other creator deities in a magnificent cosmic symphony. With Ptah, the god of craftsmen, the partnership was profound. Ptah would conceive of a thing in his heart, the seat of thought and intention. Then Thoth, the divine tongue, would give that thought a name, speaking it into physical reality. This collaboration between heart and tongue, between conception and expression, was seen as the very mechanism of creation. His role was not to replace the sun god Ra, but to enable him. It was through the intelligent speech of Thoth that Ra's creative will could be executed, his commands made manifest across the sky and earth. So when you look up at the stars at night, you are not just seeing the work of a single sun god. You are witnessing the enduring echo of a divine word, spoken at the dawn of time by the ultimate architect of reality, the God who used language itself as his building block. This cosmic intellect offered guidance not just for the afterlife, but for the marketplace and the home. The profound principles of Maat, the cosmic order Thoth upheld, were translated into practical wisdom for daily living, often channeled through texts attributed to his inspiration. Consider the instructions of Amenemop, a masterpiece of ancient Egyptian literature. This was not a scroll of magical spells, but a father's advice to his son, a collection of maxims for navigating life with integrity and success. It presents a powerful vision of a quiet, humble, and generous heart as the true path to prosperity. The text constantly warns against the temptation of ill-gotten gains. It advises that it is better to be poor in wealth but rich in character than to be a wealthy man who has stolen his fortune. One passage might counsel a man not to move the surveyor's stone to cheat his neighbor out of land, for the gods see all, and the temporary gain will bring lasting disgrace. Another saying encourages patience in the face of a hot-tempered superior, suggesting that answering rage with a soft voice is like cool water on a fire. This is the wisdom of Thoth made manifest in human interaction. It frames success not as mere wealth or power, but as a life lived in harmony with truth, where your actions are in alignment with the universe's own balance. How do you measure a successful life? For the ancient Egyptians, guided by this wisdom, it was measured by the lightness of your heart, by the respect you earned through your conduct, and by the peace you cultivated within your community. Thoth, the god who recorded the weight of the heart in the afterlife, was thus also the source of the teachings that ensured that heart would be light. His knowledge was not locked away in a forbidden book. It was available to every scribe who copied these instructions and every citizen who sought to live well. He provided the moral compass for an entire civilization, proving that the greatest magic is a life lived in truth. The same divine words that structured the cosmos also held a hidden musicality. Beyond writing and magic, Thoth was deeply connected to the harmony of music, an art the Egyptians saw as a direct expression of the universe's mathematical order. His mastery over sound was not limited to spoken spells, it extended to the very principles of rhythm and melody. As the god who measured the cycles of the moon and the stars, he naturally governed the precise mathematical ratios that create a pleasing musical scale. The correct intervals between notes were not arbitrary. They were seen as audible fragments of cosmic balance, little echoes of Maat that could be heard by the human ear. When a harpist played a perfect fifth or a singer hit a true note, they were not just making music, they were momentarily aligning their own being with the fundamental harmony Thoth upheld. This belief wove music directly into the fabric of temple rituals and royal ceremonies, where specific chants and melodies were used not for entertainment, but to actively maintain the stability of the world. This concept points toward the idea of the music of the spheres, the ancient notion that the planets in their orbits produce a celestial symphony. a grand, inaudible hum of perfect harmony as they moved through the heavens. As the divine measurer and timekeeper, Thoth was the conductor of this silent orchestra. His calculations determined the celestial rhythms, and his sacred words were the original score. The vibration that spoke creation into existence was the first and most powerful note ever struck, a resonance that still hums through everything. So the next time you hear a piece of music that feels transcendent, that seems to tap into something deeper than mere sound, consider that you might be hearing a faint, beautiful whisper of the god who used harmony as his building block. To walk through the ruins of Hermopolis Magna is to stand in the city that Thoth himself designed. This was his earthly capital, known to the ancients as Khmunu, the City of the Eight. Here, the grand temple complex dedicated to the god of knowledge was not just a place of worship, but a living library in stone, its very layout echoing the creation myth of the Ogdoad. The central sanctuary was believed to be built upon the very primordial mound that first rose from the waters of Nun, the place where the 8 chaotic forces first coalesced into order through the divine utterance of Thoth. Pilgrims would have entered a world of towering columns and vast courtyards, all designed to inspire awe and reinforce the idea that this was the axis of the universe, the point where wisdom began. Outside the main temple walls lay one of the most astonishing archaeological sites in all of Egypt, the sacred animal necropolis. For centuries, devotees seeking Thoth's favor would purchase a mummified ibis or baboon from the temple priests to offer as a direct plea to the god. These were not the pets of the deities, but living avatars, physical vessels for a prayer. Imagine a farmer asking for a good harvest, or a student hoping for success in his scribble exams, bringing a carefully wrapped ibis to be interred in these catacombs. The scale is almost beyond comprehension, with excavations revealing catacombs containing millions upon millions of these mummified creatures, stacked from floor to ceiling in endless galleries. Each bundle represented a single human hope, a tangible connection to the divine intellect they sought to access. The city's identity was entirely shaped by its primary myth. As the City of the Eight, every ritual and every festival held here was a reenactment of that first moment of creation. The priests of Thoth saw themselves as the guardians of that original, ordering vibration. Archaeological digs at the site have uncovered vast baboon statues that once flanked the temple avenues, their stone faces forever turned toward the rising sun in silent homage. They found thousands of inscribed stone slabs, known as stelae, left by visitors thanking Thoth for his intercession, proving that his wisdom was not a remote philosophical concept, but an active force in the lives of his followers. To be in Hermopolis was to be at the source, to feel the residual energy of the first word ever spoken, a word that still echoed in the rustle of papyrus and the silent gaze of a million mummified birds. This was where abstract power met tangible devotion, where the universe's architect received his daily mail. The wisdom of Thoth did not remain confined to the banks of the Nile. Centuries after the last pharaohs ruled, a new power arrived in Egypt, bringing with them their own pantheon of gods. When Alexander the Great conquered the land and his general Ptolemy established a new dynasty, a remarkable fusion began in the bustling metropolis of Alexandria. Here, in a city that was a melting pot of cultures, Egyptian traditions met Greek philosophy. The Greeks looked upon the ibis-headed god of knowledge and saw a reflection of their own swift-footed messenger, Hermes. Both were gods of writing, magic, and the hidden pathways between worlds. This was not a hostile takeover of one god by another, but a brilliant synthesis, a meeting of minds across civilizations. The result was a new, more powerful divine figure, a hybrid deity who combined the ancient wisdom of Egypt with the intellectual vigor of Greece. They called him Hermes Trismegistus, which means thrice greatest Hermes. This title was a direct translation of an ancient Egyptian honor for Thoth, the Great, the Great, the Great. He was now seen as the ultimate sage, a teacher who held the secrets of the universe in his grasp. From this divine merger sprang an entire philosophical and spiritual tradition known as Hermeticism. Its foundational texts, the Hermetica, were written as dialogues between a divine teacher, often Trismegistus himself, and a mortal disciple. These texts explored the nature of God, the cosmos, and the human soul, proposing a universe where everything is connected through a divine mind, and where humanity itself holds a spark of the celestial. The ultimate goal was a profound spiritual rebirth, a personal enlightenment achieved through this secret knowledge. This was not a religion for the masses, but a mystical path for the seeker, and its influence would stretch far beyond the sands of Egypt, whispering its secrets through the corridors of time to shape the very foundations of Western thought. His voice was the calm at the center of every divine storm. While other gods were defined by their passions and conflicts, Thoth's power resided in his impartial intellect, a quality that made him both indispensable and uniquely respected across the entire Egyptian pantheon. His alliances were not forged in battle, but in the quiet halls of council and the urgent need for resolution. With Osiris, the lord of the afterlife, Thoth shared a bond of profound mutual respect. He was the divine notary who recorded the verdict of the weighing of the heart, the final word that allowed Osiris to grant eternal peace to the justified. He was the silent partner in the greatest resurrection story, providing Isis with the magical knowledge to revive her husband. This was not a fleeting favor, it was a foundational partnership that upheld the very cycle of death and rebirth. His relationship with Isis and her son, Horus, was even more direct. He was their protector, their advisor, and their healer. When the infant Horus lay dying from a serpent's bite, it was Thoth who descended with words of power to draw out the poison, saving the future king. He guided the young god, teaching him the wisdom he would need to one day claim his throne, acting as a divine mentor who ensured the lineage of order would continue. These relationships were built on a clear understanding. Thoth's knowledge was the ultimate tool for maintaining Mot, and gods who represented that order naturally gravitated toward his light. This collaborative dynamic, however, was truly tested in his dealings with Set, the volatile god of chaos and storms. Here, Thoth faced his greatest challenge not as an enemy but as a perpetual mediator. The epic struggle between Horus and Set for the throne of Egypt threatened to tear the cosmos apart, and Thoth repeatedly stepped into the fray. He did not join Horus' camp to destroy Set. Instead, he acted as a neutral physician to both sides. When Set tore out the eye of Horus, Thoth used his magic to restore it, creating the powerful Wedjat symbol. Yet when Horus grievously wounded Set in retaliation, Thoth again applied his healing arts, mending the chaos god's injuries. This impartiality was not a sign of weakness, but a profound strategy. Thoth understood that for true, lasting balance to be achieved, chaos could not be utterly annihilated. It had to be managed and integrated. Set's chaotic energy was a necessary part of the universe, a force of change and raw power that, if completely eliminated, would make the world stagnant. Thoth's role was to prevent that energy from spiraling out of control, to heal the wounds it caused, and to constantly argue for reason over rage in the divine council. He was the check on Set's excesses, a living embodiment of the principle that even chaos must ultimately answer to intellect. Where did this leave Thoth in the hierarchy of the gods? He was neither a king like Osiris nor a queen like Isis. He did not command the raw elemental power of Ra or the untamed fury of Set. His position was something else entirely, that of the ultimate cosmic civil servant. The other deities relied on him not for his strength in battle, but for the tools without which their own power would be meaningless. What is the authority of a sun god without a scribe to record his daily journey? What is the judgment of an underworld king without an accurate ledger of a soul's deeds? What is the magic of a mother goddess without the sacred words to enact it? Thoth provided the foundational infrastructure for reality to function. He was the divine administrator who kept the records, the diplomat who brokered peace, and the archivist who preserved the laws of existence itself. This made him arguably the most secure god in the pantheon. While pharaohs rose and fell and gods battled for supremacy, Thoth's position was never threatened because his knowledge was a resource every other power needed to survive. He was the one god who could speak truth to power, who could chastise Ra in his weariness and mediate between the most bitter rivals, all because his loyalty was not to a person or a faction, but to the unshakable principle of cosmic order. In a world of passionate deities, the god of the quiet mind was, in the end, the most powerful voice of all. His voice was the instrument that tuned reality. For the ancient Egyptians, the universe was not inert matter. It was a living tapestry woven from a single, fundamental force called Heka. This was not the spellcasting of fairy tales, but something far more profound, the very energy of creation itself. Think of it as the divine programming language of the cosmos, the underlying code that gods used to shape worlds and humans could learn to access for their own needs. It was as natural and essential as the air they breathed, a power present at the moment of creation, flowing through everything, and the ultimate master of this fundamental force was none other than Thoth. He was considered the source of all Heka, the divine magician who understood its grammar and syntax better than any other being. His mastery was absolute because he was the one who had first spoken the words that structured existence. Every magical act performed by a priest was, in essence, a humble request to tap into the wellspring of Thoth's own power. When a healer needed to cure a venomous snake bite, they did not merely recite a random phrase. They invoked the name of Thoth, calling upon the specific instance where he saved the infant Horus. The spell would recount that mythic event, saying, in effect, "As you, Thoth, drew the poison from Horus, so now you must draw the poison from this person." It was a direct appeal to precedent, using the god's own past actions as a template for present power. The words themselves were not just a request, they were the vehicle for the magic. Thoth provided the Hekau, the words of power, which were believed to carry the very essence of the force they described. To speak the correct word for health with the proper intention was to manifest health itself. This is why accuracy was so vital. A mispronounced syllable or an incorrectly copied hieroglyph could render a spell useless or worse, dangerously unpredictable. For protection, a priest might inscribe a specific spell from the Book of the Dead onto an amulet, calling upon Thoth as the great magician who pacifies the gods to shield the wearer from malevolent spirits. In divination, a seeker might ask a question of a statue of Thoth, believing the god's knowledge of all things past, present, and future could guide the priest's interpretation of signs. In every case, the practitioner was acting as a conduit, channeling a sliver of Thoth's cosmic authority to heal a body, guard a soul, or glimpse the future. His knowledge made the invisible forces of the universe accessible, turning the raw potential of Heka into a tangible, life-changing tool. The 42 gods surrounding Osiris were not a silent audience. Each represented a specific nome or district of Egypt, and more importantly, a specific sin or moral failing. This was not a single verdict, but a meticulous, point-by-point interrogation of an entire life. The deceased was required to stand before this divine tribunal and address each assessor directly, not with a plea of innocence, but with a declaration known as the negative confession. "I have not stolen, I have not committed murder, I have not told lies, I have not caused others to go hungry." Each statement was a direct challenge to the specific domain of the god it was spoken to. The air in the hall must have been thick with the weight of these denials, a litany of proclaimed purity echoing against the stone. And for every word spoken, Thoth was there, his stylus poised over his palate. He did not merely record the final outcome of the scales. His sacred duty was to document each individual confession as it was uttered, creating an immutable transcript of the entire proceeding. He was the court reporter for the cosmos, ensuring that every claim of righteousness and every unspoken implication was captured in permanent, magical script. His record was the evidence presented to the scales. When the heart was placed upon the balance, it was weighed against the truth of those very declarations. A heart heavy with a stolen loaf of bread would sink when the assessor of theft was addressed, proving the confession false. Thoth's written account was the standard against which the soul was measured, a document so absolute that even Osiris himself could not dispute its contents. This made Thoth's role the final, unchangeable link in the chain of judgment. His written word was the ultimate authority, the divine ledger that sealed a soul's fate for all eternity. This linguistic mastery made Thoth the ultimate diplomat of the divine. He was the only god who could truly understand and speak the native tongues of every single entity in existence. To the other gods, he articulated the pleas and rituals of humanity. To human priests, he translated the complex decrees and desires of the celestial court. His role went far beyond mere translation between people and deities. Ancient texts suggest he could interpret the growl of a lion, the whisper of the wind through papyrus reeds, and even the silent, patient language of stone. This was not a magical trick. It was a fundamental aspect of his nature as the god of the divine word, the hekau that underpinned all of reality. Since he was present at the moment of creation, when all things were spoken into being with specific names and purposes, he inherently knew the true name and essence of everything. This profound ability positioned him as the essential messenger, the cosmic intermediary who could traverse any boundary. He moved effortlessly between the world of the living and the stark silence of the Juwat, the underworld. He was a welcome guest in the sun bark of Ra as it sailed through the day sky, and a trusted counsel in the moonlit hall of Osiris. This function as a mediator between realms is precisely why, centuries later, the Greeks so seamlessly fused him with their own god, Hermes. Like Thoth, Hermes was the messenger of the gods, a nimble traveler who guided souls to the afterlife and carried information across the cosmos. The identification was a natural one, creating the powerful hybrid known as Hermes Trismegistus. But for the Egyptians, this was not just a title, it was the core of his daily work. In ritual practice, a priest acting as a medium would invoke Thoth directly, asking the god to lend his voice so that a divine message could be clearly understood. They believed that without Thoth's intercession, human words would be meaningless noise to the gods, and divine commands would be an incomprehensible thunder to human ears. He was the divine switchboard operator, ensuring that the line of communication between heaven and earth was always open, clear, and true. His understanding of all languages meant he was the only one who could hear the universe speaking, and the only one who could make sure its messages were delivered. Each tool in Thoth's hands was a key to a different cosmic function. The scribe's palette and stylus were far more than mere writing instruments. The palette itself, often shown as a rectangular slab with two circular wells for red and black ink, represented the very act of creation and differentiation. The black ink gave form to words on a blank papyrus scroll, just as Thoth's divine speech gave form to the universe from the formless void. The red ink was reserved for headings, important names, and magical words of power, marking the crucial points where divine energy entered the human world. His sharpened reed stylus was the instrument of precision, carving immutable truth into the fabric of reality, whether on a tax record or in the book of life itself. This was the technology of order, the physical manifestation of his role as the great organizer who turned chaos into a legible text. Hovering above his palette or held in his other hand, you would often find the Ankh, the iconic symbol of life. This was not a generic blessing. For Thoth, the god of magic and the moon's cycles of rebirth, the Ankh represented the specific, active power to sustain life and even restore it. He did not just record the outcome in the Hall of Judgment. His knowledge was the very force that could heal Horus from a deadly snakebite and temporarily reanimate Osiris. The ankh in his grasp signified that his words were not merely descriptive, they were generative and life-giving. The correct incantation, the precise magical formula drawn from his infinite wisdom, could literally breathe life back into a body or a soul. His authority to act so decisively was symbolized by the scepter, a staff with a stylized animal head and a forked base. This was the emblem of divine power and dominion, showing that Thoth's pronouncements carried the full weight of the cosmos behind them. He was not a passive observer, he was an executive power, a god whose decrees on law, magic, and cosmic balance were enforced because his knowledge was the ultimate source of authority. And arching over it all was the crescent moon, his silver crown. This was his natural timekeeping device, the celestial proof of his mastery over rhythm, mathematics, and the endless cycle of decay and renewal. The moon's predictable journey across the sky was the universe's most perfect calendar, a constant, silent lecture on the mathematical order Thoth upheld. Together, these symbols paint a complete portrait of his influence. The palette and stylus show he is the recorder, the ankh reveals he is the sustainer of life, the scepter proves he is the authority, and the crescent moon establishes him as the master of time. He was the cosmic administrator who did not just keep the records, but who also wrote the laws, enforced the balance, and powered the very cycles of existence with his profound and active intelligence. Yet even a god of eternal wisdom is subject to the relentless flow of time. The world around Egypt began to shift, and the steady stream of devotion that had flowed to Thoth for millennia began to slow. The conquests of Alexander the Great and the subsequent rule of the Ptolemaic dynasty introduced a new cultural current. Greek became the language of administration and elite discourse, and while the old gods were not immediately cast aside, their context was changing. The magnificent temples, including Thoth's own city of Hermopolis, now operated within a Hellenistic framework where Egyptian deities were often syncretized with Greek counterparts to create a unified pantheon for a multicultural kingdom. This was not destruction but a transformation, a blending that allowed Thoth's essence to survive in a new form. As the Roman Empire absorbed Egypt, this process continued. The old state religion, so deeply tied to the pharaoh's divine role, lost its central patron. Roman emperors were distant figures, not living gods on the Nile, and the intricate theological machine that required Thoth's constant oversight began to wind down. The final, decisive blow came with the rise of Christianity. The new faith viewed the ancient gods as demons or empty idols, and the closing of the pagan temples under Christian Roman emperors strangled the public, institutional worship that had sustained Thoth for 3,000 years. The priests who had preserved his rituals and interpreted his will were dispersed, and the sacred ibis and baboon catacombs fell into silence. It seemed the divine scribe had written his final entry. But ideas are far more durable than institutions. Thoth's legacy did not vanish, it simply went underground, finding new vessels in which to preserve his ancient knowledge. The fusion with the Greek god Hermes had created a powerful philosophical phoenix, Hermes Trismegistus. This thrice great sage became the legendary author of the Hermetica, a body of mystical texts written in the early centuries of the Common Era. These works, composed in Greek but steeped in Egyptian cosmological concepts, presented a secret path to spiritual enlightenment. They taught of a single divine source, a cosmic mind, and humanity's potential to achieve gnosis, a direct salvific knowledge of God and the universe. This was not the state magic of the pharaohs, but a deeply personal, esoteric system that saw the material world as an expression of the divine. Hermeticism preserved Thoth's core identity as the revealer of ultimate truths, repackaging his wisdom for a new age. This hidden river of thought flowed into other secret streams. In the dimly lit workshops of medieval and Renaissance alchemists, the name of Hermes Trismegistus was invoked with reverence. Their quest to transmute base lead into spiritual gold was not merely a chemical fantasy. It was a physical metaphor for the transformation of the human soul. The Emerald Tablet, a text attributed to Hermes himself, laid out the principles of this great work, echoing the ancient Egyptian belief in the power of divine words to alter reality. The alchemists saw themselves as the intellectual heirs of the Egyptian magus, practicing a sacred science that Thoth had first revealed. Similarly, various Gnostic sects, which emphasized secret knowledge as the path to salvation, found a natural affinity with the figure of the divine scribe. In some Gnostic cosmologies, a benevolent being of wisdom and light, often named Thoth or assimilated with Hermes, acts as an intermediary who helps humanity escape the prison of the material world. He was the revealer of the hidden keys, the same role he had always played. So while the temples lay in ruins and the prayers fell silent, the essence of Thoth, the wise teacher, the master of hidden knowledge and the guide to cosmic truths, lived on. His voice was no longer carved in hieroglyphs on temple walls, but it was whispered in the coded texts of alchemists, debated in the circles of Renaissance philosophers, and sought by mystics across the centuries. The god had departed, but his legend had become a permanent part of the human search for meaning. The divine scribe has found new temples in the glowing screens of our own era. Thoth's journey from the banks of the Nile to the pages of graphic novels and the lore of blockbuster films reveals our unbroken fascination with his archetype. In Neil Gaiman's modern mythology, American Gods, Thoth is reimagined as Mr. Ibis, a soft-spoken funeral director in a small American town. Here, he is still a scribe, but his medium has changed from stone and papyrus to a personal computer, where he types out the stories of the old gods and the new. This portrayal brilliantly captures his eternal role as a record keeper, adapting his ancient essence to a world of highways and motels. His core attributes remain intact. He is still a being of immense knowledge and quiet power, using his wisdom to navigate a landscape where belief itself is the currency of survival. The Stargate franchise presents another compelling version, depicting him as a member of an advanced alien race, the Gold System Lord. While this interpretation leans into the science fiction trope of advanced technology appearing as magic, it preserves his identity as a master of knowledge and a formidable intellect, a being whose power is derived from what he knows rather than pure physical might. Video games have eagerly adopted him as a source of ancient wisdom and magical power. Games like Smite place him directly on the battlefield as a playable character, a mage who wields ink and parchment as his weapons, hurling spells that mirror his historical roles of writing and cosmic balance. His abilities often revolve around debuffing enemies and empowering allies, a direct translation of his mythological function as a mediator and restorer of order. These modern interpretations are not random inventions, they are selective amplifications of his most resonant traits. Our culture latches onto his identity as the knower of secrets, the architect of language, and the weaver of spells. He becomes a convenient narrative shorthand for ancient, esoteric power, a figure who can logically possess the hidden keys to a plot. Why does this specific god continue to capture our imagination? Perhaps because in an age of overwhelming information, the idea of a single, benevolent intellect who can sort, record, and make sense of it all is more appealing than ever. We are still drawn to the promise of hidden knowledge, the belief that there is a master key to understanding the universe, and Thoth, in his many modern guises, remains the ultimate keeper of that key. The sheer scale of Thoth's following becomes tangible not in grand temple inscriptions, but in the silent, subterranean darkness. For centuries, archaeologists have been uncovering vast underground galleries, catacombs so immense they contain not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of carefully mummified bodies. The most famous of these sites is Tuna el-Jebel, the necropolis for Thoth's sacred city of Hermopolis. Here, labyrinthine tunnels stretch for miles, their shelves packed floor to ceiling with mummified ibises. Each bird was a physical prayer, a vessel for a devotee's plea for wisdom, health, or favor. A farmer might offer an ibis mummy in hopes of a bountiful harvest, a student before a crucial exam, or a merchant seeking success on a journey. The act of purchasing and dedicating this sacred animal from the temple priests was a direct, tangible link to the god's intellect, but the ibis was not alone. In the sprawling burial grounds of Saqqara, another complex revealed baboon catacombs holding the remains of countless primates, each wrapped and prepared with the same meticulous care. The discovery of these mass burials speaks to an organized, state-sanctioned industry that lasted for over 1,000 years. Temple precincts housed breeding grounds for the animals, and priests oversaw their mummification according to strict ritual protocols. The animals were not killed as a sacrifice, but were either raised for this purpose or died naturally before being carefully preserved, wrapped in linen and placed in pottery jars or decorated coffins. Some even had their own miniature death masks. Analysis of these mummies using modern technology like CT scans has revealed intricate details. The bodies were often desiccated with natron salt, stuffed with linen or sawdust, and their posture carefully arranged, with the ibis's head often turned to the side and resting on its body, as if in eternal repose. What does this tell us about daily worship? It shows that devotion to Thoth was not an abstract philosophy reserved for the elite. It was a deeply personal, accessible practice for the common person. You did not need to read hieroglyphs to understand the power of offering a physical representation of the god's own sacred animal. The sheer number of mummies, estimated in the many millions, proves his cult was one of the most popular and enduring in all of Egypt. Excavations at the ruins of his temples, from Hermopolis to Abydos, further illustrate his reach. Inscriptions and statues depict him receiving offerings from pharaohs, confirming his state importance, while countless small amulets and household shrines found in ordinary homes show he was a constant presence in daily life. These archaeological finds transform Thoth from a mythical figure in a scroll into a god whose presence was felt in the heartbeat of an entire civilization, a deity whose wisdom was sought by millions, one carefully wrapped ibis at a time. His partnership with Maat was the very anchor of reality. As the goddess of truth and cosmic order, Maat represented the perfect, harmonious state of the universe, the ideal condition where everything functioned as it should. Thoth, as her divine consort, was far more than a passive scribe who merely wrote down what she represented. He was the active intellect that applied her principles, the living tool through which cosmic balance was constantly measured, enforced, and restored. Think of Maat as the perfect blueprint for a stable universe, and Thoth as the master architect and engineer who consults the plans, takes the measurements, and makes the necessary corrections to keep the entire structure from collapsing. His entire portfolio, from writing and magic to judgment and the moon's cycles, was a unified system dedicated to a single, monumental purpose, preserving this divine order against the ever-present threat of its opposite, Isfet. Isfet was the embodiment of chaos, falsehood, and injustice, a corrosive force that sought to return the world to the formless void that existed before creation. Every lie spoken, every injustice committed, every act of violence was a crack in the fabric of Maat, a tiny victory for Isfet. Thoth's knowledge was the primary weapon against this entropy. When he healed the wounded Horus or Set, he was not just mending a god, he was repairing a tear in the cosmic order caused by their conflict. When he provided the magical words for Osiris's resurrection, he was using his wisdom to reverse an act of ultimate disorder and re-establish the cycle of life and death. His meticulous record-keeping in the Hall of Judgment was the ultimate defense against the chaos of a meaningless afterlife, ensuring that truth alone determined eternity. Even the steady, predictable rhythm of the moon he governed was a celestial argument against chaos, a constant, visible reminder that the universe operates by knowable, reliable laws. Without Thoth's active and intelligent stewardship, the perfect, abstract concept of Maat would have been powerless against the relentless tide of Isfet. His was the hand that held the scales, the voice that spoke the healing spell, and the mind that calculated the celestial motions, all to ensure the balance did not tip. From the silent chaos of none to the final judgment of the dead, Thoth's story is the story of order itself. He was the first word spoken into the void, the architect of language who gave humanity its voice. He was the celestial timekeeper whose wisdom stabilized our calendar, the impartial scribe who ensured justice in the afterlife, and the master magician whose knowledge could heal gods and resurrect kings. His legacy is woven into the very fabric of our world, found in the foundations of science, the principles of justice, and the timeless human quest for understanding. We are still drawn to Thoth because he represents the ultimate power of the mind, a quiet intellect that can calm divine storms and measure the cosmos. He reminds us that the greatest magic is knowledge and the most enduring power is truth. Who is your favorite figure from the ancient world? Share your thoughts on Thoth or any other Egyptian deity in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys into the heart of mythology.